Hello, I'm Denny Somack. Welcome to the Rock Podcast. Now, I'm a rock historian, producer, and best-selling author, and this is the number one podcast for classic rock. Before we begin, I want to remind you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's free, no charge, and you'll be notified when a new episode is released and also have access to previous episodes you may want to listen to. On this episode, Jeff Skunk Baxter is our guest. You know him from Steely Dan, the Doobie Brothers, his session work, and he has a solo album, Speed of Heat. Now, he's just released an expanded version of that solo album with a brand new edition called the Storyteller's Edition. We discussed a lot of different topics, and he's a great storyteller, as you'll hear in this exclusive interview with Jeff Skunk Baxter. So anyway, I was very anxious to talk to you about this. This is really your first solo album. You played on so many amazing tracks. But where did the idea for doing an enhanced version with commentary to Speed of Heat, which is the name of the album, which came out about a year and a half ago, but this version just came out. Whose idea was that?
Well, actually, it was mine. Uh, and it was, I guess, inspired by a bazillion years ago when I was a very, very young man. My dad had given me a copy of a Bobby Darin album. And I was a big Bobby Darin fan. I thought he was great. Um, Also loved the arrangements, Don Costa's arrangements and stuff. I just loved all that stuff. So my dad gave me a copy of something called the Bobby Darin Story, which was an album that he did where he narrated each track. I mean, and this was back in the 50s, so, or really like early 60s. And I don't know, it's just, I remember that and I thought, wait a minute, that was a really cool idea.
Mm-hmm.
So we went to the record company and they said, yeah, we like that idea. So we did it.
And response so far has been pretty good?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
Because
surprised more people haven't done it,
I can't think of anybody else that's really done it except for a promotional, album or something, but not to be
Right.
released. I think it is a great idea. So, tell me about you got some of your classic songs on here that you redid, Do It Again, and then you got some new things. When did you write the new things?
Over a period of time, myself and my co-producing and writing partner, CJ Vanston, would find time in between both of our schedules and just go in and write and record.
I got to believe that over the years, people have said, "Why don't you do a solo album?" Does it just didn't feel like it, didn't have time, or
Uh, I think certainly part of it was time. Uh, and we figured out kind of a workaround, which was okay, let's do it when both of us have time to actually um, go in and do the work in between, again, the schedules. Number two, I always thought that I was never quite comfortable with the idea of going and doing a solo album right after you leave a very successful band. I get it from a marketing point of view and all of that, but from a creative point of view, I think you need some time
yeah.
to think about what you want to do. And between that and having a very busy schedule, both in the music world and in my day job, um, working for Uncle Sam, there just really wasn't a whole lot of time. So this worked out very well, and we did it over a course of a few years. So it wasn't we didn't go in for 2 months and hand it in.
So, what was your feeling about uh, redoing the version of My Old School?
Well, I
And
remember
and
back in
Steely
the day
Dan.
when I was with Steely Dan, I used to sing that song live. I know that Donald did it when we did the Midnight Special. But as we began to tour more, for some reason, Donald thought I should sing it. So I did. And the more we did it, the more energy it seemed to accrue. And after a while, I thought there's something about this song that has a lot of pent up energy. And one of these days, I'm going to find out what that is. And I thought, okay, this solo album is an opportunity to do that. And I sang it. I forgot to put my credit on the record. I, I don't know if that was a Freudian slip or not, but um, um, uh, but I loved the song, and I thought it came out really well. The response to it was great.
So are you, I know you occasionally do some dates. Are you planning any kind of a full tour?
Well, yeah, we've done a number of tours, East Coast, West Coast. We went to Japan, um, and I believe we're looking at doing another West Coast tour coming up in a couple of months.
Hmm. And do you have expectations as to how well or this album will do and when you'll do another one?
Well, so far it's done pretty well.
Great reviews.
Um,
Great reviews.
well, thank you. Um, it's nice to know that somebody cares. And
And I read all the other reviews.
yeah, well, I'm sure not every review was good. I mean, people have their own opinions. Uh, but for the most part, the feedback I've gotten has been very positive. Um, and I remember when I first started looking at shopping, my manager shopping the deal, I would get comments from some of the record companies like, well, there's no focus. And I'm saying, okay, well, if it's a solo album, isn't the focus supposed to be me? They go, well, yeah, but we have to have a musical theme. No, that doesn't make any sense either. So I think that was just an excuse. So BMG, they got it.
Yeah.
And it was a fun opportunity to be able to play all kinds of stuff that I like to play. I don't really think there should be any limitations, frankly. And then I'm thinking about doing another record
Right.
and something very different than that one too, because I want to enjoy myself and I want to explore some different avenues.
Now, who guests on this album with you?
Mike McDonald came on. It was originally going to be an instrumental album.
Hmm.
Um, and I ran into Michael at a fundraiser up in Santa Barbara. And Mike said, hey, somebody told me you're doing a solo album. If you want me to do something on it, I'd really like to. I thought about that for a second. Yeah, absolutely. No more instrumental album. You're gonna do all kinds of stuff. And the idea was that, okay, I'd love to have you on the record, but I've got a couple of criteria that I'd like to follow. One is it has to be written by the three of us, myself, CJ Vanston, and Michael, and you, or whoever the artist is. And number two, it has to be something way out of your wheelhouse, something very different than you've ever done before. If it doesn't work, you can blame it on me. If it works, you can tell people how brilliant you are. And the reviews on the well, all of it, the stuff I did with Michael, the Johnny Lang song, Clint Black, I mean, none of that stuff is anything that you'd really expect from those artists, but it shows their depth of talent.
Right.
So I had a really good time.
Is there anybody you wanted that you couldn't get due to scheduling or?
No, not really. The only thing was I did ask Steve Tyler if he would do my old school, and I sent him a demo that I'd sang on, and he said, "Well, yeah, okay, but who's singing on the demo?" And I said, "Well, that's me, but I'm not a singer. That's not what I do." He says, "Well, sounds good to me. Why don't you do it?" I went, "Because I'm not a singer. You are." And he said, "I think you should do it." I said, "Are you kidding me, Steve?" And he went, "No, man. I think you should take a shot." So
Good.
that's the only thing that would relate to what you're talking about, I think.
So first time I saw Steely Dan, this will boggle your mind, was at the Bijou Cafe in Philly, and the you were the opening act for Loudon Wainwright III, who had had a hit with Dead Skunk.
Right. Dead skunk in the middle of the road.
Right. And you could hardly fit on the stage. So
That's probably true. Yeah.
tell me a little bit about the early days playing with Steely Dan.
They were heady times to, uh, I hate to be, you know, use, trite, maybe what might be considered a trite phrase, but they were heady days. It was a band
Hmm.
and we enjoyed playing together, and there was a lot of dynamics in that band and a lot of talent. And it was fun playing for people who were not quite sure exactly what we were doing. I found that fascinating. And it also is inspiring and motivating. It was great fun. It was really great fun.
Now, the band didn't really have one main guitarist. You and Denny split the solos, right?
For the most part, yeah.
How did you decide who does what?
Um, I guess just by process of seeing which one made most sense.
Okay.
I love Denny's guitar playing.
Yeah, he's great. He's a founding member too. I mean, I think he's
Yeah.
the real founding member, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, as myself, Denny, Jimmy Hodder, David Palmer, Walter Becker, and Donald Fagen.
Yeah. All right, let me ask you a few questions about some songs as if this were commentary tracks that you do on your career. Um, what do you remember about Dirty Work?
I remember I loved the song. This is it's simple on a lot of levels and poignant, I guess might be a great word for it. I just loved the tune. I thought it was really, really beautiful. And I thought David did an incredible vocal on it. That's a hard song to sing
Yeah.
and get it right.
Reeling in the Years,
Fun tune,
big tune.
big song, fun song, rocking. Showed what Steely Dan could do when they wanted to rock.
Midnight Cruiser.
Ha ha. Again, a great vocal from Jimmy Hodder, the drummer. And I liked it because I never heard anything quite like it. It was kind of a straight ahead rock tune, but not.
Yeah.
Um, it was a little bit majestic, a little bit orchestral in the arrangement. And when we finally finished and listened back to it, I went, wow. That's different.
Now, when you first heard the original Do It Again on the radio, do you remember where you were?
I think I was in my car, my 1968 Ford Torino with a ballast and blueprinted 351 Cleveland engine in it.
Did
Very
it,
California.
yeah, did it sound like you'd expect it to sound?
Yeah, because our engineer, Roger Nichols, who is a fantastically brilliant, talented engineer, I think probably the best recording engineer ever,
Hmm.
was so meticulous and so focused on what he did when it was mixing that it virtually sounded the same. Plus, we would play the music back sometimes through in our cars and use broadcast limiters to see what it was going to sound like.
Right.
And the broadcast limiters are very weird things. They're usually um, split into three different frequency bands, and it really makes a huge difference when you mix if you're not aware of what's going to happen when it comes up against that wall. But it sounded just exactly right.
Hmm. What kind of guitar or what technique did you use for My Old School?
What kind of guitar? It was a guitar that I had just finished making uh, the, the the morning of before we did the session. I
It's sort of
routed
got
it
a
out, and
little bit of a distortion on it, but that's intentional, right?
well, yeah, I did it through a VT22 Ampeg amp, which I love, uh, and I think in the back of my mind, I've always wanted to at least learn to play saxophone, and I learned to play out of trumpet and saxophone books because at the time, back in the day, there really weren't a lot of guitar books that were focused on melody.
Hmm.
I mean, the amplified guitar was still a young instrument back in the 40s and 50s. So the style, I think, was somewhat reflective of playing saxophone. Was kind of staccato, kind of uh, focused, as you might say. And the phrasing, I think, had the feel of a lot of the saxophone phrasing that I had heard and was used to. And yeah,
Yeah.
it was that was a song. Sometimes you play songs and sometimes you attack them. And I think that was one that fell more into the attack uh, uh, bin.
Okay.
Go at it, you know.
How much time elapsed between when you stopped playing with Steely Dan and you joined the Doobie Brothers? Because you'd been playing live with them before you joined, right?
With the Doobie Brothers, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, I believe it was somewhere between 1 millisecond and 1 nanosecond.
Hmm.
I was in a hotel room having a conversation with some of the guys in Steely Dan when I was playing with the Doobies in Nebworth in England. And they said they didn't want to play live anymore. So I hung up the phone and said, well, I think that's it for me and Steely Dan. And one of the guys in the Doobies turned to me and says, well, now you're in the Doobie Brothers. Okay.
So you're in the Doobie Brothers. What's the first song you recorded with them?
Well, I recorded some tunes with them as a studio musician, and then recorded some songs with them as a member of the band.
Right.
So the first song I think I recorded with them as a studio musician was probably South City Midnight Ladies playing pedal steel, I think.
You you play on Take Me in Your Arms, right?
Oh, yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Again, kind of an angular solo, but it was fun to step out and again explore the art of the possible.
Now you brought Michael McDonald into the Doobies when they needed some help, right?
That's correct.
And did you play on taking it to the streets?
I did. Yeah.
What did you think of did you look at the band as like a totally newer sound or didn't skip a beat? I mean, what did you think when Michael stepped in? I mean, you'd already played with him, obviously.
Yeah. And I was really happy with the result. I knew Michael could do it. And I think it was the perfect storm in a sense, um, in that it was a good time for the Doobie Brothers to move on to another arena of music. The band was very talented, and I always felt there was a lot of undeveloped potential in that band. And when Michael came into the band and brought a keyboard into the band, which up to that time was an all guitar band, it laid out a different set of parameters and musical opportunity.
Hmm.
And the band really stepped up. I actually had the band working as a rhythm section for before we did or while we were doing the Living on the Fault Line album, because number one, they're great players, and number two, I always enjoyed the discipline and the challenge of being a studio musician. To me, that was something that was important for me to attain, because to me that was a level of excellence that I wanted to be part of. And so I talked to Ted Templeman, the producer, and said, what do you think if we have the band play on Carly Simon and Hoyt Axton and Leo Sayer, and as a rhythm section? The idea being, producer doesn't care what band you're in. You show up at 9, downbeats at 9:30, you play it right or you're fired. And I felt, since that was the sort of Steely Dan mantra, that it would be good for those guys to inculcate some of that in their musical consciousness.
Right.
And they exceeded all expectations. And I think laid the groundwork for Living on the Fault Line and eventually the Minute by Minute album.
Right. So you've played on a bunch of sessions, obviously. You're somewhat known as a session musician. Do you have some favorites? You played with Rod Stewart, you played with all sorts of people. Any favorites?
Um, yeah, there was a band called Brooklyn Dreams
Oh yeah.
that I remember going in and doing a solo on. And I don't know where it came from.
Bruce Cedeno, right?
Yeah, he
Hmm.
was Donna Summer's boyfriend.
Right.
And I'd met him through working on the Donna Summer stuff. And I don't know where that solo came from. It was one of those, I stepped back and went, I have no idea where that came from.
You talking about hot stuff?
No, I'm talking about on the Brooklyn Dreams album.
Oh, and the Brooklyn
Well,
Dreams.
the hot stuff was just one take. That everything clicked, just made perfect sense. You know, being a session guy, go in and do it. Thank you.
Right. Now I got to ask you something because this is weird, and I'm a big fan of Spirit. You were in Spirit for what, one album?
Pretty much. And Randy was an old friend. I'd
Yeah.
known Randy since the 60s.
Yeah.
and we'd stayed in touch, uh, well, since 1963 or 64. And I did have a chance to play with him. And really, that guy was, I think, an underrated guitar player. He was one of the most creative guitarists I'd ever heard. You never knew what was going to happen with him. Kind of like Jeff Beck. He was not a master of the obvious.
Right. You had a similar experience. You met Hendrix at a music store and then played with him.
Yeah, Jimmy James. Yeah,
Tell me that
yeah.
story.
Well, and we were doing audio, right? So I can blow my nose on
Yeah.
camera, right?
Okay.
Okay. Um, yeah, I was working at a place called Jimmy's Music Shop, which was right across the street from Manny's on 48th Street in New York, which was at the time the mecca of musical instruments. I mean, there was Manny's, Jimmy's, Terminal Music, Charles Ponty, Ben's Music Shop, all these music stores where you could literally walk in the front door and get a 40% discount just by walking through the front door.
Hmm.
So when, mom and pop stores around the country were selling one or two tuning reverbs a year, we were selling 20 a day, especially over Christmas. It was nuts. So I did all the guitar repair for Jimmy's as well. And I had just set up a right-handed Stratocaster for a left-handed player. And he had never come in and picked it up. So it was sitting there on the rack. And when Jimmy James came in and with a beat up old Fender Duosonic, he wanted to, trade up to a nicer instrument. And so I just happened to have that instrument. And so I handed it to him and he played it and said, I really like this. And I went, well, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll trade you even. I got docked 3 weeks pay for that because obviously the Duosonic wasn't worth as much as the Stratocaster was. But that's how we met and became acquaintances and friends.
And you obviously saw him after that.
Yeah, I went down to the Cafe Wah, uh, saw him play a couple times, got a chance to play a little bit of bass with him, and again, Randy was in the band, so it was perfect. It was
Right.
just, yeah.
Did you know Randy at that time?
That's when we met
Oh, that's
because he had come in as well to do some guitar buying, buy some strings and stuff.
so I don't want to talk about anything you're not allowed to talk about, but could you just mention you have this whole other career? Just explain what it is without going into any details that might get you in trouble.
Well, I do have a career working with the government, United States government. Um, I focus on wargaming, space warfare, um, ISR, uh, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. A lot of space issues, unconventional warfare, red teaming, um, uh, cutting edge technology, especially in aviation, space, electronics, lasers, missile defense, things like that, counterterrorism.
Keeps you pretty busy.
Yes, it does, especially now. It is a busy time.
Do you think you're going to write or be able to write a book about it someday?
I've already started.
Okay. Any restraints on that?
Well, certainly there I have to be circumspect about what I write about.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not going to write about anything that's classified.
Okay.
or um, uh, in any way, um, specific or uh, what would the word be?
Confidential,
Well,
controversial.
confident, of course, confidential, and anything that's proprietary.
Hmm, okay.
But there were a lot of adventures. I've done some pretty interesting things, I guess. You know?
You've been following this launch where the two astronauts got stuck?
Yeah. Yep. Uh, and I think people tend to get used to things that are absolutely technologically brilliant and sophisticated. Nobody thinks about getting on an airplane. Think about what you're getting onto.
Hmm.
Think about exactly what that is. So the same as in space, people I think are beginning to look at space travel, at least in low Earth orbit, and unmanned and manned to the moon as sort of, okay, you know, that's typical. It's very difficult, very dangerous. And so I'm really glad that these folks are coming back. And as they say, shit happens.
Yeah.
So the good news is they're gonna get back.
Yeah. You ever wanted to go in space yourself?
Absolutely. In a heartbeat.
Yeah.
If I could pull it off, I would absolutely want to do it.
Okay. I got about two more questions and I'll let you go. I know you got a busy schedule. What did you think of the Doobie Brothers biography that came out recently? Did you read it?
I did. I don't know. Same made
Accurate?
sense to me.
Accurate.
Made sense to me.
Yeah. Okay. And finally, for the fans, what's in your record collection?
Or my audio collection.
Your audio
Because
collection.
I have a lot of vinyl, a lot of CDs, um, and of course I have music on hard drives.
Right.
Um, gosh,
House is on fire. You got to grab a bunch of things. What are you taking?
couple of guitars, a my schedule book, passport, birth certificate, change of clothes. So I've been through this. I've evacuated my house a number of times here in California for a number of different situations, and you pretty much get to understand what's important.
Yeah.
Stuff is not important.
Well, if you did have the time to grab some records, which ones would they be? People ask me all the time to ask this question.
Well, since I have pretty much everything transferred to the hard drive, I grabbed one of the computers, and I've got everything that I need and want on a number of computers,
You remember the
all
first
of which are backed up.
you remember the first
Pardon?
record you bought?
I think it was Walk Don't Run by the Ventures
Okay.
and not supersonic guitars, Tough Guitar, I think it was called by Billy Muir.
Right.
And I knew I bought a copy of Apache, the Jorgen Ingman version.
Right.
And then my grandmother bought me a copy of Green Onions. She was pretty hip.
Yeah. Were you into to blues, jazz as well?
All of it.
Yeah.
My dad had a disc jockey friend in Washington, D.C. And when we moved to Mexico City, he would send my dad boxes of records. So I grew up listening to Charlie Christian and Django Reinhardt and Wes Montgomery, Ella Fitzgerald, Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, plus um, B.B. King, Albert King, and a lot of the Chicago blues stuff, J.B. Hutto and the Hawks, Muddy Waters, all of that stuff, because we had those records. And
Did
I
you,
was studying classical piano at the same time. So I'd never want to be without my collection of Otto Klemperer conducting the Berlin Philharmonic and all of Beethoven's works. So, yeah,
you mentioned a couple of legends in there, and B.B. King, etc. Did you get a chance to play with any of those people?
absolutely. B.B. King and I became friends way back in the day. Oh, and I had Les Paul records too. And Les and I became really good friends. But B.B. King and I used to play together occasionally. He was very kind. He said, "You're the best rhythm guitar player I've ever heard." And I took that as a huge compliment because I think anybody can play lead. Rhythm guitar is an art. Probably one of the greatest rhythm guitar players I had ever heard was Don Wilson from the Ventures. A great rhythm guitar player is a combination of bass player, drummer, rhythm section, and percussionist. So many different things. It's really the glue that holds that stuff together. So I took that as a tremendous compliment. I mean, he loved my guitar playing, but he was very. I remember when he told me that. I took that as a real compliment coming from him.
He was one of those people that when you would talk to him, and I had a number of situations with him, he always made you feel like you were the most important person in the room.
Well, his heart was big. He had no issues. Some people have issues. He didn't. Um, and I remember we did a Showtime special, and he was sitting down. And of course, I sit down when I play all the time.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that. You
Yeah.
still do that, right?
Yeah. And we was sitting down, and he said, "Skunk, if I'd known how good this is, I would have been doing this since I first started playing guitar." So I'm just telling you, man, way to go.
Right.
It's the it's the right and it's the right way to approach the instrument, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was all excited about that
Mm.
because he'd had a knee operation.
Well, since you're a fan, I'll tell you this, and then we can wrap it up. Last time I saw him, he's always telling stories and stuff. I said to him, listen, I got to ask you a question. You know, all these great English guitar players, Clapton, Beck, Page, who really is the best white British guitar player? You want to take a guess at who he said?
Oh,
Peter Green.
Peter Green. That would be my guess.
Yeah.
His recording of the Supernatural has to be the greatest minor blues recording ever. It's brilliant. Yeah, I you started to say it as I was saying it would be Peter Green.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
He threw me off because I thought for sure he's going to say one of the other three. But he said, no, I'll tell you something. There's one guy that's the real deal, and it's Peter Green.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I listened to that record. That's one of the songs that's on my iPhone when I'm sitting on an airplane. I put in the headphones and just sit back and listen to him play the Supernatural. It's brilliant. Captures everything.
okay. Final question. What'd you feel like when you got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Well, I took it as quite a compliment. Anytime your peers recognize what you do and like it, I think that's cause for celebration.
My thanks to Jeff Skunk Baxter. If you're listening to the audio-only version, just want to remind you we have a video version on YouTube. It's free, no charge. As always, thanks for joining us on the Rock Podcast and helping us become the #1 podcast in classic rock. Find us at our website, rockandrollforgrownups.com. That's rock, the letter N, roll, the number 4, grownups.com. Get in touch. For now, I'm Denny Somack. See you on the next episode of The Rock Podcast.